In this video, we're going to talk about personal budgeting and do some examples. So budgeting is the process of creating a plan to decide how much you're going to spend or save of your available income. And so once your employer takes out any deductions, so this could be for taxes, insurance, the amount left is called your take-home pay. So what you're actually taking home out of the total that you're earning. And so let's do a couple of examples. So example one, we're going to calculate our monthly pay. So it's helpful to know how much you're making per month. And so let's say Saya works full-time as an executive assistant. She has a check for $2,021.07 directly deposited into her checking account every other Friday. What does she earn in 1 year? And then what is her average monthly pay? So we can do this a couple ways. We could do a quick estimate of what her monthly pay would be just by doubling her biweekly pay. So if she's getting paid every other Friday, you can assume that most months have 4 Fridays. So most months you're going to have 2 pays per month. And so based on that, we could just take her pay and we can multiply it by 2, and that gives us $4,042.14. So that's approximately what she makes a month, but that's approximate. And it's an estimate because not every single month is going to have 2 pays. A more accurate calculation would be to find the yearly pay, so how much she makes per year, and then divide it by 12 to figure out how much she makes each month. And so to find out how much she makes per year, well, first of all, we know that she makes $2,021.07 every 2 weeks. So we have to ask ourselves, well, how many weeks are in a year? Well, if there are 52 weeks in 1 year, and she's making this amount of money every 2 weeks, let's figure out how many 2-week periods are in a 52-week year. So 52 divided by 2 is 26, so that'd be 26 payments that she's going to get per year. And so to calculate the yearly pay, then what we can do is we can take her payment amount, $2,021.07, and multiply it by 26, since there are 26 times throughout the year that she's going to get this payment. And so if we do that, we get $52,547.82. And so that's going to be her yearly pay. Okay, and then we want to find her monthly pay. So the next step is going to be to divide that by 12. So to do her monthly pay, we're going to take the previous amount, the yearly pay, $52,547.82, and we're going to divide it by 12. And when we do that, we get $4,378.99 per month. And so that's a more accurate calculation, this one right here. And notice she's making a little bit more monthly than she is up here with our quick estimation. So estimations are great, but it's also nice to know how to figure it out, figure out a more exact amount. And so let's jump into example 2. So if you buy 2 lattes out every day at $4.25 per cup, how much would you spend in 1 year? And so if I spend $425 per cup, but you're buying 2 of them, I'm just going to multiply that by 2. And so that's $8.50 every single day on coffee. How much would you spend in 1 year? Well, we'd have to figure out how many days in a year. So 365 days in a year times $8.50 per day gives us $3,102.50. It's really helpful when you have these types of expenses to calculate not just what you're spending in 1 day, because that's simple. You see that when you pay for it, but to figure out what you're paying long term, so you really understand the how much it's really costing you over the long term. Okay, so the next example, if you spend $8.43 for lunch at Subway 3 times a week, how much would you spend during a 16-week semester? And so I'm looking at this 3 times per week, so I'm going to figure out that first. So we've got $8.43 for lunch, and we're doing it 3 times a week. So if I multiply that by 3, I get $25.29, and that's what I'm spending per week at Subway. And then if there are 16 weeks in a semester, then I'm going to take that amount. So our 16-week total is going to be $25.29 times 16 weeks. And so this person is spending $404.64 on Subway. Now let's look at what's called the 50-30-20 budget. So this is a common budgeting system that just breaks down your take-home pay into different categories based on a percentage. And so what this means is the goal is to use about 50% of your take-home pay for necessities, okay, things that you have to have, 30% for wants, and 20% to save or pay down debt. And this is just one framework. The nice thing is we're going to do a couple examples using this framework, but if you have different needs where those percentages need to be different, then once you know how to do this once, you can adjust those percentages to fit your needs, personal needs. So let's first talk about the difference between necessities and wants or luxuries, and then paying our debt. So let's start first and talk about necessities. So these are things that you have to have no matter what. So we're talking about food, shelter, insurance, etc., clothing. There are fixed necessities, meaning the cost is fixed. And those are things like your rent or your mortgage or your insurance. And sure, these things can go up from year to year, but generally month to month they stay the same. Maybe your cell phone bill or internet, childcare, student loans, etc. Variable necessities would be things that change month to month. So that would be like your gas bill, your utilities, so maybe your water bill, things that you're using, and so the cost is dependent on how much you're using. And so with this 50-30-20 budget, we're looking at about 50% of the budget for all of these necessities. And then the 30%, that would be wants. So those are things like Netflix or your gym membership, or maybe dining out, going to a movie, and those can either be fixed or variable. And so anything that's fixed would be like things like Netflix, or anything that has a monthly subscription, or maybe a gym membership. Things that you're paying for monthly and it's the same price every single month. And then things that are variable would be like going out to eat. I would say unnecessary. New clothing, going to the movies, etc. And then we're trying to say, in this framework, 30% for those types of things, and then 20% to save or pay down your debt. And having a small cushion to have some money saved is such a great idea. Credit card debt is an extraordinary expense, so anything you can do to pay that down is absolutely helpful. And so let's do a couple of examples with personal budgeting. So example 3, if Angel's take-home pay is $3,000 per month, how much should they spend per month on each of the following categories? Assume they're trying to follow the 50-30-20 budget. Okay, so if her monthly pay is $3,000, if we want to know what 50% is of that, then we need to multiply that by the decimal equivalent of 50%. So the decimal equivalent of 50% is 0.50. So I multiply that by 0.50 and I get $1,500. And so this is necessities. Okay, and then I'm going to take the $3,000 and I'm going to multiply by the decimal equivalent of 30%, which is 0.30, and I get $900. So this would be wants. And then I'll take the $3,000 and I'll multiply it by 0.20, which is the decimal equivalent of 20%. And that's going to give me $600. And so that would be savings or debt. And when we're doing this, this should all add up to $3,000. So 1,500 plus 900 plus 600 is $3,000. It's a good thing to just check that to make sure you did it correctly. And like I said earlier, you know, if you wanted to use this for yourself, you could easily change these percentages to match your own personal needs. And it just gives you a ballpark of what you should be spending or your goal for each of these categories per month. Okay, and then the last example, we're going to look at Jason, who brings home $2,146.79 per month, and he has the following necessities below. And so we're going to look at all of these necessities. And so first question, how much money is left after these expenses are paid? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add these all up. So if we add these all up, for part A, we're going to get $1,321.65, okay? But for part A, it asks us how much money is left. So we're going to take his monthly pay, or his take-home pay per month is $2,146.79, and we're going to subtract his expenses. So this is total expenses, and these are his necessities. And so we subtract and we end up getting $825.14. So this is what is left over after he pays his necessities. And so for part B, what percent of his budget is used for these expenses? So when we want to find a percentage, we're going to take the part and we're going to divide it by the whole. And so the part in this case, we're going to look at his total necessity expenses, so that would be $1,321.65, and we're going to divide it by his whole take-home check. And when we do that, we end up getting 0.61564, and it keeps on going. And so, you know, in this case, you want to look at the rounding rules in the problem. So this says round to the nearest tenth of a percent. So what's really important is that we convert to a percent first before we round. Okay, so we're going to take this decimal and we're going to move the decimal place 2 spots to the right. So we get 61.564, and then that decimal keeps on going. And then we're going to round to the nearest tenth of a percent. So we're going to look at the tens place, which is where the 5 is. We look to the right, which is the 6. So the 6 tells us to bump that 5 up to a 6. We leave everything to the left the same, and then everything else becomes right, or to the right of the 5 becomes a 0. And so we don't even need to write those. So it's 61.6% of his income is spent on necessities. So if Jason was using the 50-30-20 rule, this would tell him that he is way over his 50% goal of spending 50% of his budget on necessities.